This is Discern Realities, a Dungeon World podcast. My name is David.
And my name is Jason.
Well, Jason, before we get started with the show, I would like to inform listeners about our magic item contest.
Yeah, so we're going to be running a magic item contest. Listeners, we want you to send us your awesome original magic items for Dungeon World. We were thinking about going with a theme, but ultimately we decided, hey, let's just see the best thing they've got. No theme required. So any old magic item will do. Here's how it's going to work. You're going to find the post for this episode and also the next few episodes. If you're listening to this, it's posted. So go to the G Plus group, find the post, and in the comments of the post, just put your magic item in there. We are going to be reading these magic items on the air in the What Here is Useful or Valuable segment over the next few episodes, probably episodes 11, 12, and 13. So if we get some good ones, we're going to read those on air. And then on episode 14, we're going to announce a winner. And the winner will receive a $25 Amazon gift card.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and move right into our first segment. Our first segment is What Happened Here Recently. Jason, I understand that you had something you wanted to talk about in this segment?
Yeah, I do. So one of the things that I'm often impressed by with Dungeon World that perhaps is not something that happens in other fantasy games is the moves that get triggered in Dungeon World actually often lead the fiction. They force the fiction into places that maybe no one saw coming, right? I want to talk a little bit about just a thing that happened recently that was kind of along those lines. So there is this thief move. It's called Heist. And what was going on was the party was in the middle of Undertake a Perilous Journey, right? And the scout role for Undertake a Perilous Journey, just to remind people, it dictates whether they run into trouble or not, or whether they get the jump on trouble, or whether trouble gets the jump on them, right? So they had the leg up on the trouble, which was a basilisk, a large lizard-like creature that was turning people into stone. So the scouts started running into all these stone statues, and they eventually found the lair of the basilisk itself, sleeping among stone statues. And they kind of had to jump on the basilisk. Like there was they had a good shot at like taking it down. They began to think, well, like, why would we do this? Like, what is our reason for wanting to even bother with this thing that could turn us to stone, right? And eventually the wizard, through some different moves, determined that the head of the basilisk had very powerful magical and alchemical properties, right? So they were going to get the head of the basilisk, right? Well, so the thief asked if he could use his brand new heist move, okay? There's a thief move called Heist, and I'm going to read it to you now. So Heist says, when you take the time to make a plan to steal something, name the thing you want to steal and ask the GM these questions. When acting on the answers, you and your allies take +1 forward. And the questions are, who will notice it's missing? What's its most powerful defense? Who will come after it? Who else wants it? Right? Now, here's the thing.
Yeah.
Cutting off the head of a basilisk is maybe not in the spirit of the move, you know? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't know. Stealing something's life, stealing something's head, is that a heist?
Well, that was the kind of the conclusion we came to. We were like, well, I'm not sure that fits, right? I'm not sure that's what they intended with this move, right? But, the player said, well, I think by the very nature of asking these questions, I'm going to be filling in fiction that wasn't there before, right? Like, particularly the who will notice it's missing, right? That I was like, well, yeah, by asking that question, I can say no one, which would be boring, or I could say maybe there's like a powerful wizard who will notice it because the basilisk was guarding something for him, right? And so the player he seemed willing to accept the fact that I was going to adjust the fiction a little bit for the questions, right? This is a total meta conversation, right? And so with that in mind, I was like, okay, well, I think we're here to tell a good story. We're here to play to find out what happens. And I think this would be interesting. And so let's do it. Like, let's say this works. Everyone at the table knew that what I was answering, like the stuff I was coming up with, was not what I originally intended. Everyone was like really committed to a very good, exciting story being told. Everyone just kind of suspended their disbelief a little bit and we went with it, right? And it was great. It ended up being that the basilisk was actually guarding this place of power that was nearby. And we had a little bit of a cliffhanger ending on the place of power, and I can't say what it was because they'll probably hear this before we resolve it. But the scene wrapped up with being this really like kind of this whole extra like subplot sort of thing that nobody saw coming, right? It was, kind of cool and dark and introduced like a brand new villain and all that kind of thing. So it took the story in a cool place. And it was, if we look at Dungeon World as a conversation meant to propel story, this was a great example of that. This was a great example of like the moves in combination with the table conversation, like creating a really, really fun story outcome.
Yeah.
And it required a little bit of conversing, right? Like, because the move itself was maybe not like a great fit, but we were, I think we were playing in the spirit of the game.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's legit, I'm not going to say I would always allow the heist move to be used in that way, because I'm afraid some bad situations where people are always trying to be gamey about it and always trying to use the heist move for everything they're trying to take.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's I think you do it on a case by case, right? And in this case, it was almost the acknowledgement by the player and myself that yeah, he was going to get a +1 forward for acting on the answers, but the answers themselves were kind of like, like problematic. There were problems being created that probably weren't going to be there if he hadn't asked the questions, right? So that's all I got.
Well, let's go ahead and move on to the next segment then. Our next segment is What Should I Be on the Lookout For? Jason, I understand that we actually have a fellow Gauntleteer who's given us some materials that we should be on the lookout for. Would you like to tell us about them?
Yeah, so the other day, one of our Gauntlet members named Tim, I actually don't know his last name. I wouldn't say it on the show anyway, but I don't know his last name because his G+ handle doesn't have his last name. He's just Tim B to me. He created this really terrific set of Google Drive based play-by-post materials for people to run play-by-post Dungeon World games. And now I should tell you, in the Gauntlet, this play-by-post thing is really taking off in a big way. We have lots of members doing play-by-post games, and Tim and a few other people who are using Tim's method are doing Dungeon World. I have not participated in one of them myself, but I have recently just wrapped up a play-by-post, and it was pretty interesting. But these materials are really good. They look really sharp. They include a really nice, like, GDoc friendly blank character sheet. They have sort of like a communal, like, bond sheet so that everyone can be looking at that, like, all at once, so like all that information's in one place. It has a very, very detailed, like, instructions with examples of like how to actually play in the play-by-post, like how you post different types of things and like what certain sorts of like notations mean and that sort of thing, and a really nice like just set of rules for the whole thing. And it's really good. It's just really, really solid. The one person I know who's using Tim's materials is doing a play-by-post right now, and he says they work really, really great. Like they're really, really solid. So I definitely encourage listeners, if you're interested in checking that out, you should join the Gauntlet G+ community, where you can find a link to our Play Aids folder, where we have not just this, but like lots and lots of awesome things. Yeah, I just wanted to bring that to people's attention. You're running a play-by-post right now, aren't you?
Yes, I am. I was actually looking at Tim's materials that he put up just yesterday. I was looking at them, and they're really good. I wish that I'd had some of them when I started my play-by-post, because it would have made the job a lot easier.
Yeah, these are really solid. I mean, and we should mention that his were inspired by another Gauntlet member, Rich Rogers's Apocalypse World play-by-post stuff. So he's got a good like template in that, but he's also put some really nice like DW specific like touches in there. So
yeah, I'm definitely going to be using that bond page as soon as I get my players with some bonds. I mean, right now we're just kind of holding off on that just to let the fiction develop a bit more.
Oh man, flags of the future. Fuck bonds, flags. That's where it's at. That's for another. That's for another. That's for another episode. Though. That's for another episode.
Okay.
Well, just before we leave this, how is your play-by-post going? Like, to me, I don't think play-by-post is really my thing personally. I think it's really cool. I've enjoyed the couple times I've done it, but I just am more into this sort of like improv-y acting sort of aspects of role playing, and you don't really get that in a play-by-post. But I know a lot of people really, really, really dig play-by-post. But I'm curious, like, what do you think about it? Like, how's that going?
So for me, it's really great for me as the GM, it's the perfect venue for me to test out Perilous Wilds, because Perilous Wilds has all these things that have you rolling on tables to randomly generate the world. So I can do that like without the players having to sit there and watch me roll a bunch of dice and figure out if this is going to work or not. And it's also a great opportunity because right now I'm working like 50, 60 hours a week. And being able to make any face-to-face or on-air games has been really tough for me. So it's been perfect for this little short stage in my life where I'm going to be doing this major project that's requiring me to work so many hours.
Yeah.
And it's really helped me get some people who haven't played Dungeon World into the game, because every single one of my players is brand new to Dungeon World. I think one or two of them have played a single face-to-face session before. Besides that, this is their first time through, and they're doing great. Like, it just, once again, shows what an easy system Dungeon World is to get into. And we are traveling around in this world that they helped make up, and I helped make up a little bit, and I think we're all having a really great time. I'm loving it. It's a blast.
Cool. Yeah. So just before we leave, these are Tim B's Dungeon World play-by-post materials. I highly recommend you join the Gauntlet G Plus community, listeners, if you want to get a hold of those. If you just find Tim B, I'm sure he'll give them to you. But I could use them for my purposes too, which is to get you guys to join our community. So,
all right, awesome. Well, let's go ahead and move on to the next segment. Our next segment is What Here Is Not What It Appears to Be. And this week, I wanted to talk about something that some of our listeners and fellow Gauntleteers have asked us to talk about, in particular, listener Daniel and listener Farrell. They've asked us to talk about weapon tags and how they inform the fiction or what they do mechanically, and to just kind of give a broad explanation for how they work, because these aren't necessarily something that are in every single trad game, and weapons in general behave differently in Dungeon World than they do in other games. We covered this a little bit when we talked about unarmed combat, but I want to have a more focus on weapons. And weapon tags in particular. Some of the more common weapon tags are like forceful, messy, pierce, serrated, reach, near.
I think serrated that's mostly found in the fighter signature weapon, right?
Any weapon can get it, but serrated is mechanically +1 damage.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah.
And pierce is mechanically ignores 1 armor. But the forceful, the messy, and the reach and the near, those ones are only more relevant in the fiction, but that can really make a big difference in how you use that weapon, or if you can use that weapon.
I play with lots of new players, and they tend to pick tags that are, in my opinion, are maybe not the best, like, narrative. They might be really solid tags just for being able to get, like, extra damage or whatever, but I think a lot of players don't understand the importance of, like, say, forceful and messy, right? And I think that might be worth talking about. But just broadly speaking, weapon tags, I mean, they're just fictional, like, permissions and limitations, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think that's just what I wanted to talk about. And then maybe a few other specific questions, but we'll get to those in a minute.
All right. Well, so where do we start?
So you mentioned that you think the forceful and messy tags are particularly powerful in conversations that we've had.
I do, yeah.
Why would you think they're more powerful than pierce or serrated, which give you an actual mechanical benefit?
I think it just depends on how we're defining powerful, right? That might be the starting point. Piercing and serrated are going to be great all the time, right? Like, you're always, in every circumstance, you're going to get an extra point of damage. Like, if you manage to hurt the thing, you're going to get an extra point of damage. That can make the difference between killing the creature or having to cope with it a little bit longer, right? And so, I guess there's an argument to be made that maybe those are more powerful. I don't know. But I happen to think that if used creatively, forceful and messy are way more powerful. Forceful, by the book, says the blows knock a person back a pace or possibly off their feet, right? I think that's very powerful. Imagine if you were fighting a guy by a cliff, and he's, on the edge of the cliff, and you narrate your blow forceful. Like, forceful gives you permission to narrate, like, a little bit of extra oomph into your hit, right? And to justify, again, it's like a narrative permission, to justify knocking homeboy off the cliff, right? At that point, it doesn't matter how much damage it does, because you knocked homeboy off the cliff. See what I'm saying?
Perfect example, because that's just like what we were talking about in what happened here recently, when we let the fiction kind of inform the mechanics a little bit more, where you mechanically took him out of play, not by damage, but because of you had a forceful tag.
Right, yeah. And Messy's the same way, right? Okay, yeah, I did 4 hit points of damage, and that wasn't enough to kill you, but it might have been enough for me to cut your arm off, right? It might have been enough for me to to cause you to have a massive gaping bleeding wound that, if I'm playing honestly in the fiction should cause the guy to run away, right? Like, despite the fact that he might have, 6 more hit points, if he's got
right, or pass out. Yeah.
The fact that he has like a big nasty bloody wound should cause him to be like, oh shit, this guy's for real and I want to get the hell out of here, right? But again, it's in the hands of the player, right, to make it powerful, right? It's that conversation again, right, between the GM and the player.
Right, it's the conversation. Yeah.
I mean,
you need to make sure that it's happening.
Yeah, if that conversation is not happening, then you're not going to get the full advantage of these things, right? So, I will amend my statement to say that I don't think any of them are more powerful than any of the rest, but I do think, though, in the hands of the right player and the right GM, forceful and messy can be quite effective. There's nothing wrong with like giving players the benefit of their hits, right?
And sometimes that means, with these reach and these near tags, sometimes that means the weapon isn't in play yet, or it can't be in play because they're on top of you.
Yeah. I'll tell you, the reach and near and the hand and all that, I don't think I've ever consciously like thought about those distance tags, like it's never like consciously occurred to me like, oh, that's a near weapon, and I don't think they're quite like within that range. Like, all you have to do is just pay attention to the fiction, and that shit's easy.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't come into play nearly as often as forceful or messy, but on the fighter's signature weapon, it requires that you pick one, or you can pick more than one if you choose versatile, which lets you pick two. And since my player picked both of those, I always made sure I brought it up in the fiction why it was important that his sword was, so long that he was able to hit this thing while he was like riding on a horseback or things like that.
Yeah, I think that's smart. I think that's really wise of you to do. Also, they're not just affirmative things, right? They can be limitations as well.
Okay, I got another question, and this one I think was from Daniel. He was wondering, what about dual wielding? How do we handle dual wielding in Dungeon World?
Yeah, we talked about this right before we started recording, and I've been thinking about it ever since we started talking about it. Like, and the question is, like, do you get to use all the tags of both weapons when you're dual wielding, right? I guess so. I don't know. Actually, if I'm just being honest, I can't remember the last PC I had who even did that. So I haven't had to really encounter that much. Rangers can do it if they take that Viper Strike. Well, they get an extra D4 damage if they take Viper Strike. My instinct says, yes, you get the benefit of all the tags. I'm trying to think of a circumstance where that wouldn't be appropriate, and I'm having a hard time.
Yeah, I think it would only apply if they were using like one weapon with reach and one weapon with near, and it didn't fictionally make sense that they hit them with a polearm and a dagger.
Oh yeah, but I'd let them do it if they narrated it really well. I'd let them do it. So like,
yeah, it'd have to be a real kick-ass narration.
Yeah, like it'd have to be a real sweet-ass narration. But if they narrated it well, I would. Yeah, there are ways you can kind of punish that too, right? Like,
Oh yeah, it's a very flamboyant style.
Yeah, it's super flamboyant style. Yeah, that's going to get you in trouble. And there are a lot of circumstances where you might wish you had a free hand, right? And maybe they have to drop that weapon anyway. So,
that's true. Yeah. So. All right. Cool. Well, I think that's all the discussion I really wanted to have about it. I hope listeners feel like they understand how weapons and weapon tags work a little better after this. All right. Well, let's go ahead and move on to the next segment. Our next segment is what here is useful or valuable to me. Jason, I've got something I want to talk about this week.
Okay.
So I have recently made this set piece. I'm using it in my play-by-post game, and I'm very happy with how it's turned out, and I wanted to share it on the show and see what you thought about it. I call it the Noble Sacrifice, and I want to explain it, and then I want to explain it by way of example. So I'm just going to explain mechanically kind of how you set this up and what it is, and then I'll kind of give an example so hopefully you understand what I mean.
Okay.
Basically, how you set this up is when your players are at a temple or around a temple or are going to go to a temple, or describe the temple scene and establish that it's a peaceful religious order. So this isn't like an occultist kind of temple that they're going to want to ransack anyways. And then you want to start twisting this peaceful religious order by asking the players these kinds of questions. One of the players, as they're approaching it, what here gives you a sense of unease, and let what they say inform the fiction.
That's a good question.
Yeah. And what about this temple is surprising to you? That may be a good or a bad thing, but you can usually twist it either way. But this is the key right here. You want to ask one of your players this. Someone here saved you from trouble in the past. Who are they, and what did they save you from?
Okay. All right.
That's going to set up something very important. But let's keep moving on. Now you get into the temple, and one of the religious order comes out and meets and greets your party, and they start hinting at a ceremony that's going to take place soon. If the players stick around long enough, or if they go and seek out that person who the one player knows before, they will find out that this ceremony is actually kind of nefarious, and that particular character who has saved one of your players in the past is actually going to be a sacrifice in this ceremony.
Oh, that's pretty good. Yeah, that's good.
And they're totally on board with being the sacrifice, but clearly something a little strange is going on around here.
Can I insert something?
Yeah, sure.
For dramatic flair or effect, I would ask the question about who saved you here. I would ask that much earlier than when they've arrived at the temple. So,
oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I might even make that the reason why they're going to the temple, but I would ask it significantly earlier, possibly even a session in advance, just so that becomes a point of conversation in the party. And then when you finally pull back the curtain on it, it feels really powerful, right? But I love it. I love it so far. It's great. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, this is very compact. Like, yeah. And keep dragging out, like, what's the ceremony?
Right.
Like,
yeah.
At first, it's just a ceremony. And then when they start asking questions around the temple, they might find out that the ceremony involves a sacrifice. And then they might find out that it involves a human sacrifice, which,
that's perfect. Yeah.
I thought this was a peaceful religious
That's
order.
perfect. You start gradually revealing the horror, right?
Right. And to help reveal the horror, I wrote this custom move.
Okay, nice.
Which is, if you share a meal with the people here, roll plus charisma.
That's good.
Once
I love
again, making charisma useful.
I love when you can use charisma. Yep, we're big proponents of charisma on the Discern Realities podcast. So,
on a 10 plus, you share good company. You may ask them one question about themselves that they will answer, and they will ask you one in return. The information will be useful. On a 7 to 9, they will find you interesting and ask more of you than they tell of themselves. You will answer 2 questions, and they will answer 1. The information will be interesting, but not necessarily useful.
Okay.
And then on a 6 minus, you offend them somehow, and they despise your company. You will not be openly welcomed in the temple until you atone.
Okay, that's good. Solid.
I really liked that move because it helped me have my players in a more peaceful, transient setting and gave me a lot of permission to ask them about their characters through the eyes of these peaceful people. And then you just develop the scene from there. Like, that's really my set piece.
No, it's good. It's really solid. I like that the questions, there's a give and take there, right? Like, you with that custom move, they have permission to ask you questions and you have permission to ask them questions. And hopefully those questions sort of like bounce off of each other, right? And it gives you as the GM like a chance to sort of gradually reveal the information, right? That's pretty nice. I like it. I think it's pretty good. You could just role play that, right? But I like having it in a move. I think a move is a solid way to go. So
anytime you put a move into something, the players want to engage with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because how do you roll out a custom move? I roll it out by I kind of just like announce it in a way. Like I say, hey, just so you guys know, like this is a thing you can do here, right? So.
Yeah, so I basically, after they had been at the temple for a little while, I was like, hey, there's a group of people who are having a meal. And then I just put the custom move text there.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's particularly, in a play-by-post especially, that's kind of a nice way to roll it out.
I wanted to share the example just in case it wasn't clear how this all went down. So in my play-by-post, my players have they're traveling through the desert. And in the desert, there is this water temple. It's the Temple of Ma'aya, which is kind of a mashing up of the Arabic words for water and life, which is what this is a goddess of.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so at this temple, I asked the questions of the players, and the answers were, what here the temple is surprising to you? Apparently everyone there right now is old, like 70-something, and that's not how it usually is. And then someone saved you from trouble in the past. One of my characters, he's on the run, falsely accused of regicide, and this person sheltered them like 12 years ago from capture.
Nice.
And then when they get up to the temple, they get greeted by the priestess, and she mentions that there's this ceremony going on, and are you here for this ceremony? What brought you all the way out here? And they're like, ceremony? I don't know anything about a ceremony, but we were just traveling through the desert. And they're like, well, you're welcome to rest in our shade and enjoy our water here, because water is life. And they have the whole thing about that. And then, as they started exploring and they met with the the lady who had saved that character in the past, she's actually under guard because she needs to be kept pure for the ceremony. And it turns out, as they start having meals with these people and asking them questions, that all the young people like just avoid this ceremony because it's just too overwhelming to be a part of. It's been revealed that the water of the temple, it glows with its own light, and then one day it had gone dark, and no one knew why until someone who wears black gloves and a black cloak named Harlan came from the distance and performed this ceremony, and it brought the light back to the water. But now they have to do it once a moon cycle. That's all the players really know about it right now. So I'm not going to say too much more, but I will say I'm using it to segue and introduce a big bad whose name is Harlan.
I like it. It's good. I like how you're gradually unfurling the tension of the situation. It's really solid.
Yeah, and to put an even finer point on it, they arrived in the early morning, and this ceremony is going down at noon. So they don't have a lot of time to either convince, and I'm really loving the tension and how they're trying to deal with it, and they're not really sure how quite to deal with it. That's all I really had to say about that. Well, let's go ahead and move on to the next segment. Our next segment is What is About to Happen.
Okay, this is our ongoing comic strip AP featuring Ramshackle Crow and also Urbina Castafiel, who's been prominently featured lately. So, when we last saw Urbina and Ramshackle, they were making their way back out of a corridor underneath the Temple of the Peerless Star, having just found the Heart Gem, and they saw one of the people from the temple wearing their silvery white robes was down there with them. And so Ramshackle had the idea to try to sneak up behind that guy, and he did, and he snuck up behind him and put a knife to his throat, and that's when he realized that he had a comrade coming down the stairs, and now Ramshackle is facing this guy, and he kind of with a hostage, essentially, is how we set it up. So,
is he all the way in the room yet? Before I make the judgment,
I think it's probably at the threshold.
I say, don't make a sound, or your friend gets it, and then I start backing up slowly into the room to try and get him to follow me.
He says, "Friend, there is no call for the spilling of blood on a high holy day such as this one. Please, please release my brother, and we shall say nothing of your presence here to anyone."
Indeed, you shall say nothing to anyone. Please step this way, or I'll be forced to make a very unfortunate situation happen on your high holy day.
Go ahead and roll parlay.
So I got an 8.
I will certainly step in, and I will say nothing, but please let my brother go.
As he steps into the room, kind of motioning him towards the corridor that we just came from, I push his friend at him, and I say, "All right, so here's how this is going to work. You're going to keep walking that direction," indicating the hallway that we just came from. "When you get to a panel that's on the floor surrounded by powder, you're going to smash it with your foot. Then you're going to wait for help. All right?"
"I'm afraid I can't do that, friend, because that would mean the death of me and my brother, and I think you know that."
"I do not know that. I think that it would just mean you and your brother getting stuck inconveniently, as opposed to me sliding my blade across both of your throats right now."
He starts to look a little uncomfortable.
"Listen, you can take your chances with the trap, or you can take your chances with the edge of steel." I'm kind of shepherding them that way.
Got it. Okay. He does it, and he steps on it, and the walls drop down.
Yeah, there's a wall between me and them now. I don't have to deal with them.
Yep.
All right, Urbina, that was a close call. Let's get out of here before they make too much of a racket or alert the snake or something.
As you're having that conversation with Urbina, you hear the heavy clang, 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 clang of that central grate in the circular room. What do you do?
Oh. Well, so much for getting out of here before there was a snake.
And indeed, you see rising up out of that central grated area a huge, massive snake Its scales appear to be like you can see like the torchlight like glimmering like wildly off its scales. It almost looks like a disco glitter ball, right? It's that sort of thing. As the light hits its its mirrored scales. The thing is just massive. It has a head the size of like an ottoman. Okay, it's really big, and it's flicking its tongue out at you, and it's heading in your direction. What do you do?
Glance back at the wall, the newly formed wall just behind me. Glance back at the silvery snake.
Urbina,
and then I look up at the...
Urbina's like, what are we going to do, Ramshackle? Quick.
And then I look up at the grates that are in the wall above us, and I say, we're going to have to go in the walls. Quick, Urbina, and I cup both of my hands together to give her a leg up into the grates.
Do a defy danger intelligence for quick thinking.
I got a 6.
Go ahead and mark XP.
All right.
You give Urbina a boost. So just to remind the audience, there are, on the sides of the walls in these corridors, there are the smaller circular grates that can be pulled back, and there's like a crawl space in the walls, right? We know that the snake also goes to those crawl spaces. Urbina, you give her a boost up, and she gets inside, but it's too late for you, though. The snake has made its way there into the hallway, and it strikes. What do you do?
Like it strikes like it's attacking me, or like it wrapped around me, or
like striking with its head, like you see its fangs like whip out and it's just like flying at you.
Okay, I'm just trying to dive out of the way.
Do a defy danger with dexterity.
Okay, that's a 12.
Okay, go ahead and give us some fiction there.
Just as Urbina grabs onto the ledge and hoists herself up, the snake strikes at me, and I manage to just drop to my hands and knees, but beneath its strike, it kind of goes over top of me, and I can feel its sinuous body along my back, but its head just struck the wall, and it might be slightly disoriented for a minute, maybe.
You can quickly tell that it's moving. It's using its body to kind of corral you out of the corridor into the central space. What do you do?
Okay. I think that's fine. I'm gonna...
And you can hear Urbina. She's crying out, Ramshackle! Ramshackle!
Say, go through the wall and meet me out here. And I'm moving towards the central chamber.
Yeah, and so the snake is just kind of coiled all around this central circular chamber. It's very thick. It's thick like a tree trunk, right? It kind of reels back, and it's kind of like staring down at you. It's kind of like reared back a little bit, in that very, very like Conan-esque sort of way, right? Like giant snake staring down at, small little man. And, but you notice it starts to like move and undulate, and its scales appear to be like catching, but not just catching, but like absorbing the light all around. Like the room is starting to get like a little bit dimmer as the light seems to be drawn like into the thick scaly body of this snake, and it's getting darker and darker, and you can hear Urbina like crying out, like just like crying out your name, like Ramshackle, Ramshackle, and all you can see is just the glittering of the snake's eyes as the room gets dark, and its tongue flicking, and just a little bit of spittle dribbling off its fangs. And we'll leave it there.
All right, well that just leaves one final question. Jason, who's really in control here?
Okay, so that would be the Gauntlet gaming community, which can be found in the community section of Google+. Just go there and search for the Gauntlet. You will find us. We also run a number of online games on Gauntlet Hangouts. That's on Meetup, but you can find a link to that Meetup in our G+ community. We are also on Twitter at Gauntlet RPG. And please, 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 if you enjoy the show, go to iTunes and give us a 5-star review. It's very helpful and helps other people find the show.
All right, well, that's all that we have for you this week. Thank you, Jason. Thanks, listeners. That's our show.